'Twas the Saturday before Christmas, when all through the fandom, every member was ready for this holiday memorandum, all crowded around their television display in hopes that the whole shebang would drop a video essay. The viewers watched, ready to hear his hot take, anxiously waiting for this bit to break? I guess? I don't know. That intro was the hardest part of the entire video to write, but it's the holiday season, so I had to get into the festive spirit. And one way I love to do that is by revisiting some of my favorite Christmas movies and shows. While I usually just like to rewatch Hawkeye on loop to fill the Kate Bishop-sized hole in my heart, I had a craving for Iron Man 3 this year. Because yeah, it's a Christmas movie, I don't care what you have to say. Look at the giant Christmas bunny and try and tell me it's way too early in the video to start yelling, I'm sorry. But Iron Man 3 is a Christmas movie, I will die on that hill. Iron Man 3 is widely regarded to be one of the most controversial films in the entire superhero genre, but I've always had a soft spot for this movie, so I was curious to see how it held up on rewatch, and honestly, I love it even more. Now I can confidently say that my love was not misplaced, and Iron Man 3 is the best Iron Man movie. I know that might be sacrilegious for some of you to hear, but I'm so confident in that I'm dedicating an entire video to try and convince you of it, even though it has been over 12 years and most people haven't thought about this movie since 2013, but I still care. So go and grab yourself a cup of hot cocoa, get nestled all snug in your beds, and let visions of Iron Man dance in your head. I may as well address the elephant in the room right off the bat because this video doesn't work if I can't, that being the big Mandarin twist. It's an extremely bold move to take a character who is teased 5 years before that and is heavily considered to be the biggest Iron Man villain and then pull the rug out from under viewers with the reveal that he's nothing more than an actor. I still vividly remember being in line to watch this movie opening night, more excited than ever to finally watch these two clash on screen. The marketing heavily emphasized how much of a threat the Mandarin was going to be, so when people tell me they don't like the twist, I completely get it, and for a time, I didn't either. But here's the thing, then I grew up. I rewatched this movie time and time again in a new light where I was able to actually grasp the story they were telling now that I understood the concept of terrorism. In hindsight, it might be weird to imply that terrorism makes this movie better. And listen, would I have preferred if they just did a straight up Mandarin adaptation? At the time, yeah, 100%. Nowadays, definitely not. With how Shang-Chi was able to take this missed opportunity and turn it into something infinitely better than we could have ever gotten at the time, I genuinely think it all turned out for the best. It almost feels ridiculous to get mad at the twist nowadays knowing how it all worked out in the end. So once you're able to look past the comic accurate controversy, I think it's better to just let go of what Iron Man 3 could have been and accept it for what it is. Because I think this movie uses the Mandarin for a fascinating critique of American imperialism. Yeah, that's right, this Christmas video is going to be spent primarily talking about the faults of the American military, to which there are plenty. Instead of being the traditional warlord and criminal mastermind he is in the comics, Iron Man 3's take on the Mandarin continues the theme of critiquing the government that is throughout the entire trilogy. The first film focuses on the horrors of weapons manufacturing as Tony sees the error of his ways. The second movie continues those ideas whenever it decides to take a break from setting up the Avengers to touch more on the military-industrial complex, while this third film heavily tackles on American imperialism and xenophobia. Considering it's been a few years as none of us are able to escape the endless and terrifying threat of aging, let me give you a quick recap of how Iron Man 3 portrayed the Mandarin. He is entirely a puppet in this film. Despite his genuinely intimidating broadcast preaching lessons from America's history that they're doomed to repeat, he was nothing more than actor Trevor Slattery. And listen, if he wasn't cooperative in terrorism, he definitely should have gotten an Academy Award for his performance, right? It takes a genuine star to make this facade created as a cover-up for Aldrich Killian's failed experiments work. After Tony stood Killian up on New Year's Day, which is probably the least offensive thing Tony did in the 90s, Aldrich used that desperation as motivation to be better than Tony ever was and make real change, and he did that using Extremis, an experimental form of genetic manipulation developed by Maya Hansen that could regrow cells, cure disease, and also give you the sick ability to shoot fire out of your mouth. The only problem was that Killian isn't exactly the most ethical guy, and Extremis is extremely volatile. He did a lot of illegal testing, and when the nanotechnology didn't bind with the host, they would f***ing explode. Killian, greedy as ever, came up with the genius idea of creating a boogeyman to take credit for his quote-unquote bombings, absolving him of any blame and allowing his company, AIM, to double down on their illegal testing now that they had a scapegoat to blame everything on. It was a sick and twisted plan that effectively let him control the war on terror in the palm of his hand. It makes Killian an incredibly cold and truly evil villain to hijack the real-life United States global war on terrorism that spawned from 9/11 and was actively happening when this movie released. Also, he could line his pockets with fat stacks of cash. It's even worse though, because his creation of the Mandarin was only fueling the rampant xenophobia that spawned from the war on terror and is still being felt to this day. It gave the country a more prominent threat that they had ever seen, who was actively engaging in war on their home soil. The video footage Killian used directly showed the Mandarin in Afghanistan, connecting him to real-life events and making him feel more real than ever. It was a pervasive choice in propaganda that only benefited him, as he would be able to sell his extremist soldiers to the government in order to profit off his own terrorists, thus creating and owning both of the supply and demand. Merry Christmas to him, I guess? I have to say that every so often to remind you that this is supposed to be a holiday video. I really respect them trying something new and subverting someone who has been a racist character in the past as a way to call out the United States' own racism with the war on terror. And while the Mandarin has evolved a lot in the comics since the days he was just an offensive caricature, it's a minefield to try and adapt the character in general, so it makes me appreciate the brilliant reinvention of Wenwu in Shang-Chi even more, but in the same turn, I can't help but love this take on the Mandarin as they brilliantly point the finger back onto the people in power who profit off of racism and people like the Mandarin. I'm almost scared to admit this, but I feel like this kind of take on the Mandarin fits much more in line with the story of this trilogy than introducing a mystical martial artist, despite how cool that would have been. The more I learn about the world and rewatch this movie, the more I'm able to see the nuance and realize how much of a stance this film really took. Showing how a rich white man used a fake character made up of stereotypes in the Middle East to push propaganda and fill his pockets is a bold political take for a superhero movie of all things to make. It's the most extreme possible illustration of war profiteering and a fascinating example of how people in power will manipulate the population by fueling their fears and creating a vaguely foreign terrorist as a distraction from the true evil at the top of the food chain, the military-industrial complex. Who knows what could have inspired a story like that? This reverse engineering of the Mandarin to make a greater commentary on the world Tony inhabits and how he created these demons that now literally terrorize the rest of the country and especially himself. Using propaganda as the ultimate enemy as he has to confront his role in that. It's so thematically relevant to his story and ties the entire trilogy together in such a rewarding way as Iron Man is forced to fight the final boss of capitalism. And that is what makes Iron Man 3 so special. While it does come at the expense of turning Tony's greatest adversary into an idea rather than a man, I think it makes up for that by presenting us with some really interesting ideas. I am convinced that if the movie had just stuck the landing better with Killian's character in the third act, that twist would have been received so much better. Literally just cut his big "I am the Mandarin" line and the twist isn't undercut by a weaker villain. This drastic change for the Mandarin updates the character for the modern day, all while tying him deeper into the trilogy in a more natural way as we see an extreme form of terror from a weapons manufacturer in Killian, basically holding a twisted mirror up to Tony and showing him what he could have become had he not changed. And the icing on the cake is that Tony was the one who created this monster, as this ghost from his past returns to haunt him, and the movie makes it a point to highlight the guilt he feels over that. Iron Man 3 genuinely has Tony's best characterization in the entire MCU, and I will not hear otherwise. Don't get me wrong, RDJ's best performance is still in Civil War, he was locked in like crazy there, but when it comes to portraying Tony Stark, there is nobody who writes him better than Shane Black. It's the perfect balance of quippiness and self-reflection that stands out to me more than any other MCU film Tony appears in. The decision to have Tony struggle with anxiety after the events of the Avengers was a genius move that gives him a problem he can't build his way out of. If anything, I'm mad that detail was dropped in every subsequent movie after this. It grounded Tony's character and made this larger-than-life billionaire infinitely more relatable. How do you make a man who has everything and has to be in control of everything at all times struggle? You take away control of his own head. Make him doubt his mind, the one constant guarantee he had in life that he could always rely on. That's right, you give him a realistic panic attack, baby! The genuine shock on Tony's face when Jarvis advises him that he had a panic attack in public is such a small detail I love. It's not exactly a secret that Tony can be a bit bit of an egomaniac, so the idea that he has developed PTSD comes as a huge shock to him, as if he thought he was above that as someone who takes their own word as gospel. But like, dude, you threw a nuke through a wormhole on a day that challenged everything you had ever studied and came inches within dying. He's smart enough to have seen that coming. Watching Tony try to process the fact that he has anxiety and PTSD is a fascinating emotional throughline throughout the film. From the opening scene, we're able to see just how much it's been affecting him as he threw himself into his work and is actively pushing people away. Get this, at the end of Avengers, Tony was using the Mark 7. At the beginning of Iron Man 3, he's testing the Mark 42. And this movie only takes place 6 months after the Avengers, so he's basically making 6 new elaborate suits per month. He has become fully consumed by his paranoia and is using his armor as a coping mechanism. People will literally develop 35 new high-tech suits of armor instead of going to therapy. It's crazy. This is such a natural jumping off point from the last film as his worldview is shattered, realizing that just a normal suit of armor isn't going to cut it anymore. It's why we see him making a suit of armor for literally every single situation possible. From something like a spacesuit, which completely makes sense after the wormhole, to one specifically designed for construction for some reason, he's got it all covered. It's a quirky thing on the surface, but directly shows us how paranoid Tony has become, and that does wonders for fleshing him out even further. It also does a great job setting up Age of Ultron, as this new sense of paranoia almost justifies his decision to bring Ultron to life. It's the most important part of his arc and would not work had this movie not shown the lengths Tony is willing to go to avoid talking about his problems. But it's when he's forced into a situation where he needs to rely on someone else for the first time that things get really interesting. The end of Act 1 has Tony's house explode and ends up stranded in Tennessee with the Iron Man armor drained of all its energy. Now, is Tony stupid for doxing himself? Yeah, but he's insanely cocky and needed to get humbled. It's self-inflicted chaos and another way to show that Tony is the root of every problem in his life. The world thinks he's dead, he's got no access to his resources, and is completely alone. Everything he fought for was gone because of his own hyper-confidence compensating to cover up for the fact that he was scared. The entire point of this movie is to get Tony to this moment right here alone in the woods as he's stripped down to his bare essentials. Not in like a nude way, don't picture, you're picturing that, stop picturing that. Okay, good, thank you. He's almost unrecognizable from the genius, billionaire, playboy philanthropist we've come to know, as this movie goes out of its way to prove that argument in the first Avengers right. Who is Tony Stark when he isn't in this suit? And that is why I love this film so much. The Mandarin twist is great and Tony's characterization is exceptional, but this movie serving as a complete deconstruction of everything we came to expect in an Iron Man film as Tony builds himself back up from scraps. Only this time, it's not in a cave and is in a much cooler, more metaphorical way. Also in a more literal way too, I guess, as we see him inventing things on the fly and earning that title of Iron Man. This movie has, without a doubt, my favorite Iron Man action scenes in the entire MCU, and only one of them involves the actual armor. When he's without the suit, it forces both Tony and the writers to think in creative ways, and the movie is all the better for it. We get to see Tony fighting his way through a kitchen and using his environment to his advantage as he can't rely on his usual tricks of the trade, and this is best exemplified with the mansion break-in sequence. Tony has to use whatever he can find at a hardware store to build bombs and guns to blast his way in and confront the Mandarin. He literally makes a bomb out of Christmas ornaments at one point, and people want me to think this movie is bad? You know, from a certain point of view, the moral of the story here is that it's very easy to make a bomb at home. And here's how you do it. You're gonna need... Okay, I'm gonna have to cut that off before I get arrested real quick, but none of that story is possible without Harley Keener, an original character created for this movie who acts as the heart of the film, which is incredibly important because Tony literally doesn't have a heart. I think it's so sweet that it takes a pure and innocent mind full of childlike wonder to inspire Tony and help him realize that his potential was inside him all along as a mechanic. I really love how these two play off each other because Harley does not care about who Tony Stark is. Tony is completely out of his element in Tennessee as Iron Man is more famous than he could ever be, and nobody down there cares about the man in the can. Except for Gary, but he's kind of insane. He can't use his fame to get ahead as he's trying to lay low to keep the element of surprise and can only rely on his instincts. Besides the fact that Harley exists so Tony has someone to talk to, their dynamic serves as a significant part of Tony's growth. It's a humbling experience for him to ask for help in general, but to get so desperate that he needs a child to support him? It shows just how far Tony has fallen as he is forced to open up and allow someone new into his life in a way that most other people aren't. Outside of Pepper, Happy, and Rhodey, I would argue that this random kid he barely spent a few days with was the next living person who knew him best, which says a lot about how little Tony was willing to get vulnerable, but even more about how the Mandarin's attack changed him. He literally trauma dumped on the kid about his anxiety disorder. It is a completely new side of Tony that we're seeing here. And it doesn't come easy for him either, as we can see him constantly trying to push Harley away throughout the film. Literally driving off and abandoning him at one point because he has to stop a terrorist, but at least he still keeps in contact with the kid as he looks over the armor. And he sets him up for life. How nice is that? I was so jealous of Harley watching this movie as a kid. He was living out my dream. Tony's dynamic with Harley is one of the best things about this movie and does a great job reinforcing the deconstructive themes of the film. This movie handles character work incredibly well on top of an already masterful display of the art of subversion with a twist nobody saw coming. I can't imagine seeing these things as issues just because it didn't go the way some people expected. And that's not to say this is some perfect movie, it definitely has some problems. The biggest problem with Iron Man 3 is the cowardice of not making Maya Hansen the villain of the film like originally planned. That's Rebecca Hall's character, by the way. I doubt most of you would remember that because this movie reduces her to one of Killian's goons. And then when she finally does something interesting and shows a spine, they unceremoniously killed her off. This is because famous racist and sexist Ike Perlmutter, the former CEO of Marvel and pain in my ass, didn't think people would want to buy toys of a woman. So Shane Black was forced to rewrite the film and added in Aldrich Killian as the big bad to reduce her role. And by the way, the only Killian toy they released was this single Lego minifigure. Hope it was worth it, Ike, you sexist prick. Had Iron Man 3 been able to stick to the original script, I can only assume my problems with the film would have melted away. Killian doesn't get to become a truly interesting villain in his own right once the facade of the Mandarin melts away because he has to steal traits from Maya, and they're both weaker characters because of it. I mourn the full potential of what this movie could have been if we were able to see Maya's character arc as the villain of the film without having to worry about some arbitrary anti-art thing like toy sales. Looking at the comic this movie was inspired by, the Extremis arc from 2005, Maya Hansen plays a pivotal role in that story and beyond. Killian is also there, but he appears in literally one single issue and then kills himself, so it's safe to say this movie took a lot of creative liberties during the rewrites. Fun fact, Aldrich Killian has not been seen or mentioned since the moment he killed himself. It's the one time Marvel had the restraint to not synergize the comics. That man died for nothing. In the comics, she was the person who conspired to have Extremis in the hands of terrorists so she could guarantee a government contract. There's much more nuance to it and a whole other arc where she accidentally ends up working for the Mandarin, but I guess that was too good to be true. We lost out on Maya's personal and complicated relationship with Tony as her comic history is condensed into one movie and then shared with another character. That also means that AIM is offered up as a sacrificial lamb and pretty much wasted in this movie as we don't get to see a single beekeeper suit. How are you going to introduce AIM, the organization known for their iconic design, and not give them the suits? That being said, there is still time to fix this. I would love to see Marvel bring back AIM and give them a more important role in the universe. Maybe even retcon it so Maya survived and continued to build AIM in the shadows. Listen, she only got shot in the stomach and I didn't see a funeral, so we can just say she injected herself off screen and boom, there we go. I don't know, man. I'm just trying to salvage this in whatever way I can. I know it's not the best idea to talk about what didn't work in a video called In Defense of Iron Man 3, but I'm not just gonna lie to all of you. I think the motivations behind the Mandarin twist are explored well enough that it still works, and Tony's arc comes out unscathed from all the rewrites. It is a testament to how well the rest of the movie works for me that the real Mandarin can be weaker than I'd hoped, and I'd still confidently call this the best Iron Man movie. Sane people should easily be able to agree this is better than Iron Man 2, but convincing you it's better than the first Iron Man is the hard part. Not only is it a movie that the last 17 years of superhero storytelling was built off of, but it's also a damn good film. I would say that it suffers from the same problem as this movie though, with a weak villain going into the third act, so I give Iron Man 3 the edge for its ambition. I could break down each movie on a point-by-point basis and explain why I think Iron Man 3 has better visuals, action, and a much more interesting narrative, but I think you get my point by now. Instead of tearing down another movie to try and build this one up, I want to continue to talk more about what I love about this movie, because there's a lot of that to go around. So this is the section of the video I like to call a list of things I couldn't naturally fit into the video, but still want to talk about. Yeah, I'll workshop a better title, that one sucks. But here we go. This is one of the funniest superhero movies ever. There are so many lines from this film I quote all the time. It is hilarious, and I don't think we give it enough credit for that. This movie also opens up with a needle drop of Eiffel 65's Blue. No movie that has a blue needle drop should ever be considered bad. Ho Yinsen makes a cameo in this film, paying off this line from the first film.
We met once, you know. at a technical conference in Bern.
I think it's really cool to see that play out, and it retroactively makes the first movie better in part now that we've seen that. The Mark 42 is always going to be one of my favorite Iron Man armors, for concept alone. Coating the suit to Tony's body so he can summon it wherever he is a really great idea and looks so goddamn cool. I get that nanotech is the natural evolution and makes much more sense for his character, but this was peak Iron Man suit creativity. It's a nice middle ground between convenience and practicality that I desperately missed in future movies. The Super Friends cartoon is referenced in this film.
I miss you, Happy.
Yeah, I miss you too. But the way it used to be.
Now you're off with the Super Friends. I don't know what's going on with you anymore.
That makes this the first time the MCU ever acknowledged the existence of DC, and I always think it's sweet when they do that. The Extremis virus is a breath of fresh air in the franchise. It's not just another guy in a bigger suit of armor, because that formula got stale the second time they did it, and this is so much more interesting. It's a real challenge to see Tony go up against someone who is able to cut through the armor and render his only system of defense useless. An inspired decision that inspires even more creativity from it. Ben Kingsley's Mandarin voice is incredible.
And you'll never see me coming.
He's going so heavy on the generic American accent, but it comes through as this intimidating mockery that I haven't been able to get out of my head for years. Time for another lesson. Goes so hard, man. I'm so sorry I tried that. I feel like that's insulting to Ben Kingsley even attempting it. This is the best theme Iron Man had in the MCU. Brian Tyler was working magic in that studio, and it is a damn shame they never used it again. I still listen to it all the time because it's such a perfect and triumphant anthem that fits his character really well. I touched on this next point earlier, but this movie is so gorgeous. I mean, the entire third act is a CGI fest that looks flawless, but you can actually see everything happening at night, which is a sight for sore eyes when it seems like Hollywood forgot to hire gaffers nowadays. More importantly though, look at shots like this, and this, and this, and this, and this, and I can keep going, but you get my point. This movie has some of the hardest shots in the entire MCU, and they aren't talked about enough. Shane Black is a director who knows how to work a camera, and it's such a shame he retired after making The Nice Guys. He definitely didn't make any other very bad movies after that masterpiece. I know I already gushed over it before, but let's hear it again for that mansion break-in scene. The different devices Tony makes are so inventive and do a great job showcasing just how smart he really is. Making an Iron Man suit is cool and all, but it's entirely unrealistic. Seeing him make electric shock gloves though, that's possible and something we can understand in practicality. It goes a long way to show us how smart he is when you take away technology we could never comprehend and give it a real world grounded use. He definitely killed all those guys though, right? I mean, look at that guy, he's dead. He's never seeing his family again. Merry Christmas, kids, your dad didn't come home because Iron Man tased him to death. On the opposite end of that though, the airplane rescue scene is genuinely the best hero saving civilian scene we have ever seen in live action. I honestly made this entire section of the video just so I can gush over how great this is. Watching Tony race against time to save 13 people when he can only carry 4 is thrilling enough, but the way he decides to rescue them by shocking their hands together is so creative. And the best part is, they had actual skydivers do this in real life. Obviously there's some movie magic in there, Iron Man isn't real, but it looks so good because of how practically they filmed this scene. But if one masterful sequence wasn't enough, the house party protocol in the climax is the ultimate payoff to Tony's arc in the film. He's learned his lesson and seen firsthand the consequences of his actions. He's fully realized that making copious amounts of armor won't protect him from the dangers of his world, along with his own self. And he's finally accepted that no matter how much he prepares, uncertainty is always around the corner and there's nothing he can do about it. He has accepted this truth and is ready to move on with his life in a healthier way, prepared to atone for his sins with good intentions. Even if that may not be how his story goes, but that's not important right now. What matters is that he has earned his armor again, and it allows for this beautifully explosive final battle as they all come to his rescue. Seeing him jump from armor to armor as he fights through Killian's goons in the most exciting way possible is so cool. It's the perfect finale for this movie. I could not imagine it ending any other way as it pays off so many teases from earlier on in the film. That "take him to church" line as the score kicks in will forever be a favorite moment of mine. Special shout out to this combo right here because god is it nasty. The ending might be a little too clean with Tony magically curing himself and Pepper out of nowhere, but considering that RDJ's contract ended with this film and they didn't think they'd be able to get him back, I get it. It's also nice to see this trilogy get a conclusive ending, and I love that Tony actually makes healthy decisions for once. It feels like there is a lesson learned and we see the benefits of that with that ending. While future films may have had him relapse in his suit addiction, this movie informs all of his choices going forward. It inspires him to create Ultron as the ultimate defensive protocol when given the opportunity, opportunity, allowing everyone else to retire and spend more time with their family, something he was clearly missing out on in Iron Man 3. This movie even sets Tony up and teaches him important lessons about being a mentor that we see in his dynamic with Peter Parker. The whole "if you're nothing without the suit, then you shouldn't have it at all" mentality comes from this film. I'm not sure his arc in the MCU would be as effective as it is had we not gotten Iron Man 3, so I really appreciate how this movie handles his character and writes him off into the sunset. Also, the main reason I even bring up the ending is that I wanted an excuse to bring up my favorite fun fact: that's not Robert Downey Jr. It's the most impressive deepfake of all time, as Downey got hurt on set and couldn't be there to film it on the day. Even fully knowing that's not real, my brain can't comprehend it. This is without a doubt the most seamless VFX shot in the entire MCU, and maybe that I've ever seen in general. It is such an innovative technique that this movie does not get enough credit for helping develop. And then of course, finally the post-credit scene with Banner is hilarious. I love the idea to have Tony narrate the opening and closing of the movie, and this is a really fun way to justify it all in-universe. It rephrases the entire film as an unwilling therapy session, also showing that Tony is an unreliable narrator and maybe the movie didn't go exactly like that, which is funny. Hey, maybe in real life Maya Hansen survived and Aldrich Killian was more interesting. But it's Bruce's reaction that kills me, as he's so tired of hearing him speak and exhausted with the situation he's found himself in. We honestly need more post-credit scenes like this that just show two characters with a pre-existent relationship catching up in a funny way. All this yapping is to say that Iron Man 3 is one of, if not the most underrated comic book movies, and deserves so much more appreciation. Once you free yourself from the shackles of comic accuracy and look at this movie for what it is, you can enjoy it on a whole new level. As a scathing takedown of American imperialism starring a disabled man with PTSD. Basically, what I'm trying to say is that Iron Man 3 is hella woke, and a movie that will always hold a special place in my heart. It may not be perfect, but I strongly believe it's the best of the trilogy, as it gave me all I could have ever wanted from an Iron Man movie. If you somehow made it through all this glazing to the end, I encourage you to revisit it for yourself. It's the most wonderful time of the year for an Iron Man 3 rewatch after all. Maybe you will be able to pick up on something new you love this time around, and is there really a greater gift you can afford for yourself than that of love? Look at that, we tied it back into Christmas after all. Now if you'll excuse me, Hawkeye's not gonna rewatch itself, so I need to get back to more important things and watch more Kate Bishop. But why don't you let me know your thoughts on Iron Man 3? I would genuinely love to hear what everyone has to say and continue the conversation down below. And while you're at it, make sure to give this video a like and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. If you don't do it, I'm gonna give you coal for Christmas. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention, Santa is real and he is me. So you better subscribe or else. Ho ho ho!